So welcome back to the workshop series, and today we will be talking about pathways, and specifically the pathway of humanity. So in this art work by Banksy, we can see that humanity has evolved from primates into a more sort of sophisticated or more sapient species. And the critique of Banksy is that the more sapient we become, the more numerical, the less personal we have become. And in this world, it has become very, very important to sort of regain sort of the previous humanitarian aspects that we had before, the more personal touches, to return to a state where you're truly in control of who you are and breaking away from the idea that you're just a number. So in today's presentation, we will be talking about finding your best fit pathway. And the first picture that I want to show you to get you thinking about what does best fit pathway look like is this one. Very often when people think about sort of finding your pathway, what to do in life, what to do towards the future, some people sort of have different ways of visualizing it. Some people say that it's a straight line, other people say that it's like a zigzag, other people say that it's like all sorts of like crazy curves going in all sorts of crazy directions until you reach a destination. And the imagery that I want you to sort of visualize in this case is that finding your pathway is more of like an icebreaker. And it's not following someone else's path, but rather creating your own pathway. And that's what I call finding your best fit pathway, because there isn't, the truth is that when it comes to best fit pathway, you could go towards the ocean, which is where everyone sort of is. But if you want to find your pathway, no one has built it for you yet. You have to build it for yourself because you're unique. Your conditions are unique. Your background is unique. Your timing is unique. So you have to sort of build it yourself and be like an icebreaker. And starting same as the last workshop series that we had was starting with the problem. So there are 4 reasons, I think, on why students don't pursue their best fit pathway. The first one is because of we're conforming as students. Usually, the younger you are, we think it's more important to fit in, to be socializing and sort of be part of the group than going about it your own way. So many people don't pursue their best fit because they're trying to conform with the social norms. The second one is because it's too hard to decide, too hard to sort of clarify what does best fit really mean for me. Many people have a very hard time figuring out what they want out of their lives. And we will talk about how to approach breaking down this best fit pathway into manageable chunks, manageable lengths of the pathway, as opposed to crafting the entire pathway at once. The third problem is underestimation. And this happens a lot in Reach Best, where the problem with best fit is that it's so hard to sort of balance between setting too high of the expectation or too low of an expectation. So when high school students come to us, some of them want to go super high tier universities, and they're overestimating sort of their current chances with their portfolio. And other people who come to us are like, they could really go a lot higher, but they are underestimating their abilities because no one has given them a point of reference. So other students don't pursue their best fit out of underestimation or overestimation. And the so overestimation, that you're going to sort of just fly or be taken to the sky somehow. And the last one, I think many people, and these are perception, these are beliefs, these are not necessarily true, but other people seem to be waiting for a signal, for someone to sort of tell them that that's the way, that's where you're supposed to be heading. And the way that I like to sort of describe that is people are waiting for the universe's signal, because it's not really a person. It's usually sort of like the environment and sort of the vibes that they get from a certain school or a certain condition. So some people are waiting for the universe's signal to as a guide for where they should aim at. And I think when you go down to the core of why people choose to follow the normal path or the common path rather than call it the normal path, why many people choose not to follow their own path. When you go down to the core of it, I think it's because there's risk. Or if I was to be more specific, there's the perception of risk. And if we were going to be realistic, I would even say that the risk that you're saying is very real. And very often than not, the risk is real and is big. But something that I would really want people to think about when they're thinking of, oh, it's very risky to sort of be the first one to pursue something, be the first innovative sort of outlier. Being the exception is always very hard and it's very risky. The possibilities that you don't make it, that you fail halfway through, are very real. But what I would say is that to those people is that if you stay in the safe zone, it is almost guaranteed that you will fail to meet your own expectations, that you will not be 100% fulfilled. And the reason behind it, as this image shows, is that when you're in the safe zone or in the comfort zone, you're not really doing something that is specific to you. You're trying to fit in someone else's footprint. And no matter how hard you try, your paw, like Simba's paw, is not going to fit perfectly. So in that sense, it is 100% guaranteed that you will not meet, or you will not be able to get the most out of it. There are still reasons to stay in the safe zone. But I just want to sort of break the myth that it is always the case that you should be in the safe zone, right? That there's nothing to lose by being in the safe zone. I want to break that myth, demystify it. So with that in mind, I want to encourage everyone to follow their pathways, their best fit pathways, which ultimately might mean that you have to build your own pathway. So, as I mentioned in the last workshop, coming down to sort of my objective as the founder of Reach Best, giving this workshop to interns, is to accomplish 5 things. which are the values, organizational values and culture of ReachVest. And in this particular workshop, I want to focus on the first one, which is growing into your best self. So that's sort of the theme that we're talking around. So how do you actually find your best fit pathway? How do you pick? How do you choose? How does one go about deciding what's the right path for me? And I mean, there's a lot of very interesting tools, but I wanted to narrow it down to something that is simple, efficient, and that can help you make decisions now. And this is the framework that I came around, which is what we use with high school students as well. You want to look for the intersection between your personality, your passion, or passions, sorry, and then your vision down here. And that place in the middle, that's where you want to be. That's where you can take the most, you can gain the most in any certain pathway. So in personality, I think the most important framework that I would urge you to think about when you're reflecting about yourself is what drives me? What drives me as a person to get out of bed? What is something that I care about so much that makes me actually change my plans? And the way that I have narrowed it down for you is in this sort of like 2x2 with a y-axis and an x-axis. And in the y-axis, you're looking for whether your focus is external, what drives you is external conditions, you're looking outward of yourself, or what drives you is inside. So what's your scope? And on the x-axis, you're looking at, is it more your emotions that drive you? Or is it more your logic, your mind, your reasoning? And on the bottom left, if we start with principles, if you're and everyone sort of first disclaimer is that everyone has a little bit of all of them. And actually, the way that we have sort of figured it out is you're going to have a core. And you're going to have sort of a periphery, one that sort of rotates around and comes from time to time. But you're going to have one core, only one core. So a person who is driven by principles is someone who wants to live by their values. And what that means is that you you care a lot about who you are as a person, what you like, what are your passions, and everything that you do has to be aligned with those principles and passions. So if you're someone who likes planning a lot, and that's part of sort of your nature, and that's the way that you sort of think and you're wired, then you're gonna, everything that you do, the way that you approach life is through planning. The opposite thing would be if you're spontaneous and you're driven by principles, because, and then if you're driven by principles, then you want to do everything super spontaneous. If I move to harmony, if you're someone who is driven by harmony, what you care most about is relationships, having harmonious relationships with others. And so to sort of contrast between harmony and principles, if you're someone who cares most about harmony, you're going to not be spontaneous sometimes. in order to be polite to someone, or you're going to plan something, even though you might not be very good at planning, you're going to plan something so that the other person thinks highly of you. The principal person, the most important thing is my planning. And if that planning hurts my relationship a little bit with someone else, it doesn't really matter to them to the extent. And with achievements and knowledge, if you're driven by achievements, then what you care most about is achieving stuff. So winning, getting awards, recognition, that kind of stuff. And everyone gets a little bit of sort of spark from that. But there are people who live for achievements. And knowledge is someone who, what they care most about is learning. So for instance, someone who's knowledge oriented might sort of focus on the learnings from an experience. And it doesn't really matter if they achieve something as long as they learn something. And if you're an achievement oriented person, what you care most about is the results. That I achieve something. It doesn't really matter too much if I learn something in the process. So that's the first thing that I want you to keep in mind. The second circle, passions. I think this one is pretty straightforward. So the way that I want to expand it for you conceptually is I want you to think about passions in a way of how can you pursue your passion in a way that guarantees that you will sort of have a sustainable life. So many people, when they think of like video games, for instance, they might think that it's a waste of time. But depending on how you use that passion for video games, it might turn out actually even better than being an accountant, than being a lawyer, than being a doctor, the sort of safe paths. Because the thing about video games is depending on how you use that passion, how you channel it, then you can have a lot of impact. So for instance, imagine you're a person who loves video games, and one pathway that you could follow is, of course, sort of working at a video game company, as a developer, maybe as a designer, or as someone who tests the game. Yeah, that's sort of the easy way to think about video games. Another way to think about video games when you go sort of more abstract is if what you like about video games is the gamification, and you become a big advocate for gamification, which is the idea of learning through games, then you can use that concept, put your own startup where you're going to teach languages via gamification, and then suddenly you became over $1 billion valuation company called Duolingo. And you could, then the important thing is that you would not be able to get there without your love for video games. Because in Duolingo, if you've ever sort of used it, is there's a gaming, there's a competition, there's like leagues, so you can be bronze, you can be silver, I think, gold, diamond league. And the more points that you get, sort of the more achievements and sort of different perks that you get. So it's a game, right? So you need to be someone who understands video games very well and the algorithms and how the video game works on the background in order to build something like that. So when you're thinking of passions, think of sort of like a bigger picture idea on how to really use your passions. And the last one is vision. So with vision, the most important thing about vision is, because I think most people, it's very natural for people to have sort of a pretty good sense of their personality and a pretty good sense of their passions, some more than others. But many times when you're very young, something that we tend to lack is vision. Because vision is thinking about, what do I want to achieve by the end I finish high school, for instance? What do I want to achieve by the time I complete university? And then if you were even more adventurous, you would think, oh, where do I want to be 10 years from now? What role do I want to be in? What position, what sort of task, what responsibilities? Who do I want to be when I'm 30? Right? So it's that kind of vision that really matters, because it allows you to reverse engineer how you're going to get to that goal. So let me give you one example. Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of my idols, in one of his speeches, he talks about how he got to where he is, and the way that he got there was with a vision. You know, he had the personality, sort of self-awareness, and then he had the passions. He had a passion for going to the gym. He had a passion for traveling. He had a passion for sort of helping other people, public service, and he had a passion for acting. And that was when he was sort of 15. And when he was 15, he suddenly decided that I want to become a professional bodybuilder. And he told everyone that he wanted to become Mr. Universe. And if you know anything about Mr. Universe, this contest for bodybuilders that is recognized worldwide, and it's very competitive and it's very hard, and it's usually more an American sport. He was in Austria after World War II had finished, so Austria didn't have a lot of resources for someone who wanted to be like a bodybuilder. But he didn't really care, so he followed his vision, even though most people told him he was never going to get there. And 5 years later, so when he was 20, he actually won the Mr. Universe. And he became the youngest Mr. Universe ever to have won. And the reason why winning the Mr. Universe was so important to him was because he wanted to travel to the US. That was his big vision. His passion was bodybuilding. His vision was, I want to go to the US and I want to do movies. That was his dream as a kid. And then he asked, how am I going to get there? He needed money. And he happened to be good at bodybuilding. He didn't always used to look sort of so buff. But he worked very hard, and then he got to where he was, and then he moved to the US. And when he got to the US, he started doing movies. And no, he didn't start with Terminator. He spent like 5-10 years building his career, working very hard, learning English, learning how to act. He had never taken acting classes before. He was a bodybuilder, learning how to pose, learning how to look at the camera, gaining connections into Hollywood and Los Angeles and all that sort of stuff. And then his vision was, I want to be the highest paid entertainer, the highest paid actor. And then when he finally got the role of Terminator, he actually became the highest paid entertainer for a while. And afterwards, once he became very successful, obviously as Mr. Universe, and then after Terminator and all of his movies, he rediscovered his vision for helping people. He wanted to be a public servant, someone who helps people. In this case, he was going to pursue it through government. So I don't remember at what age, but already 40s, 50s, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, maybe 60-year-old, he decides to go for governor of California, and he ended up winning, and then he got re-elected maybe once, I think, and he ended up helping a lot of people with his various initiatives. So the point I'm trying to make here is having a vision, having a goal that is long-term, and then reverse engineering what kind of milestones you have to make, you have to sort of jump in order to get to your goal, is going to help you find your best fit pathway. When you align it with your personality and with your passions. And you can only get there if you gain the courage to do and to build your own path, because it's not built yet in most cases. Creating your own path, you have to have the courage to do that. And sort of starting to wrap up this idea of best fit pathway, I want to just hammer home that it has to be unique to you. Your best fit path or pathway has to be unique to you. You have to be like that penguin, the first one to jump to the next ice, and then other people will follow you. And you might be asking why. And some people will say that the reason why you want to follow a best fit pathway that is unique to you, they usually go for the negative side. They say, well, times are different, so you can't really sort of do what someone else has already done. Times are different, technologies are different. The second reason why is because your environment is different. Maybe you want to be an actor, but you're not in Hollywood where Arnold Schwarzenegger was. Maybe you're in Mexico City, maybe you're in Tokyo. You might be in Singapore, right? Where there isn't sort of the same infrastructure that Hollywood provides. So they say your environment is different, therefore it has to be unique to you. And then the last one, sort of very cliche, is they say, well, you are different, right? You're not Robert Downey Jr., you're Ryusei best. And I think those are very valid ones, but the way that I would change it would be to this, the better wise. And the reason why you want it to be unique to you is because it gives you the ability to be more persistent, more resilient. Because when it's unique to you, you suddenly take pride on it, and it makes you feel special, and that this pathway is special for you and for you only. So even though there might be hardships and challenges along the way, you will be more encouraged to persist until you get to your goal. The second why is because it helps you stand out, right? Thinking about the positive side of the stick. By having something unique, then it becomes a very valuable thing in the eyes of other people, in your own eyes. So having a unique pathway allows you to stand out in this increasingly selective world. And lastly, you'll enjoy it no matter what happens. It will be a journey worth walking, worth undergoing, if you make it unique to yourself. So very quickly, giving you a recap on how I got, I think, to where I am. In grade 10, I was very excited. I was playing Fortnite this game developed by Epic Games a lot. And in grade 10, I decided to make my own app. I wanted to make Fortnite fun again because there was a lot of competitive people and the game was starting to get a little bit toxic. So I wanted to make it fun again, like it used to be. So I decided to make my own app, which looks something like that. And then I wanted to try to sell it to Fortnite and see if I could make money out of that. In the end, well, I didn't know how to code. So I was never actually able to put it on a phone or an iPad, but it was my sort of first entrepreneurial initiative, let's say, experiment. In grade 11, so I'm a person who really likes helping people. I think I've been helping people a lot, but in grade 11, I went to Thailand in a service trip to provide basic healthcare to refugees in Thai refugees, Thai minority refugees, and also Burmese refugees. And when I went there, I helped a lot of people, but I think what changed a little bit in my mind was how impactful it could be. Because when it came to to healthcare, what I started realizing is that many of these people that I was helping, just with the basic sort of stuff that I helped with, sort of giving them a blood glucose diagnosis, a heart pressure, breathing rates, respiratory rates, just by telling them the small stuff, many of the advice could have been life-saving in a sense. So it's like, well, you're eating too much salt. You should probably eat healthier, you know, that kind of stuff that is very basic, but they don't have the access to that sort of information. And seeing their reaction was something that really profoundly changed me. And in grade 12, well, it consolidated my identity as someone who is achievement oriented. No, I live for achievement. I like achievements a lot. I like winning a lot. And in grade 12, it was the first time I had to give a speech, and I was very hesitant. I was very sort of timid about getting on stage and talking on public, and I didn't want to do it. And I was actually trying to get out of it. But the moment I thought, oh, this is going to be an achievement, that when I become famous, it will be sort of a reference point to say, oh, Ryusei's first public speech ever was in grade 12. When I thought it that way, as sort of my first achievement towards whatever exciting future holds for me, then super quickly I got on board of it. I wrote a tremendous speech, and then I was very happy about it. So in grade 12, I realized sort of my personality, that when I think of achievement, I'm really driven to do almost anything. And then in UC Berkeley, sort of this same idea of pursuing achievements, consolidating my personality, my passions for helping, and then a vision that I had in grade 10 of pursuing startup world. And when you started connecting all of those different dots, which at the same time seemed to be completely unrelated, completely random, Fortnite, going to Thailand to be a doctor, and then grade 12 just giving a random speech. When you start connecting all of those, then you start tracing a line, which brings me to where I am now, with Reach Best, getting into Berkeley Skydeck, one of the world's most prestigious university accelerators, and making Reach Best grow very, very quickly. No? And So my advice for one caveat, which comes from Steve Jobs, is that you can't really connect the dots moving forward. So that tracing that I just did, I had no idea in grade 10 that I would be doing startups. At the time, it was just a fun video game project that I wanted to do. So I did it. I had no idea that that would lead me to building a web app in Reach Best. And then including a lot of those gamification ideas that I learned when I was doing video games. I had no idea. So it's all trust and conviction. It all comes down to trust. You have to trust in something. You have to trust in yourself, in karma, in God, in the universe, in the energy, whatever really helps you gain conviction that this path will help you get somewhere. So to conclude, as you begin your careers, always pursue your best fit. In the long run, you will be a lot happier, a lot more fulfilled, and you will end up in places that you never imagined possible. And with that, thank you very much, and we can go to Q&A.
Let me think.
Yeah. So questions regarding the theory behind it, maybe questions around sort of connecting the dots in your own life, questions about sort of my own path.
Yeah, I want to make a question about your pathway. How did you manage to understand what you wanted in this process of, in grade 11 you were in Thailand, like being like a doctor, or you want to be a doctor, and in grade 10 you were like developing a Fortnite app. How did you decide what do you want to do with your life?
Well, I will tell you first one sort of secret truth. Ryusei, right now, at 19 years old, has no idea still on what he wants to do in his future. But I think what you're trying to ask is, how did specifically the grade 10 Fortnite app and the grade 11 Thailand trip sort of lead me to, or how did that connect with Reach Best? How did that connect with Reach Best? And I think one thing that helped me was doing what I thought was right in the moment. So the reason why I did the Fortnite app was because I was very passionate about it in the moment. The reason why I went to Thailand was because I was very passionate about sort of trying out a different interest, potentially moving towards medicine or healthcare or whatever, as well as getting the achievements in both of them. So doing what I was very passionate about at the moment was driving me. And when I got to Reach Best, the way that those two things connected for Reach Best was I started using my previous experiences as sort of resources to help Reach Best grow and become a more solid startup. And when I looked towards the past, was like, oh, I've got this Fortnite app experience, and I've got also this volunteering experience. And I was trying to fit that in, whatever was relevant. I was trying to fit whatever was relevant to Reach Best. And I think that the way that it connected, I wouldn't know necessarily, more towards very long-term vision, because that's something I'm still figuring out. But taking advantage of your past experiences and learning how to sort of like pick them and break them apart in a way that you can use them now in something that seems very different has definitely helped me a lot. No, it was not exactly an answer to your question, but I hope that helped.
Yeah.
It could be maybe questions on for you. So maybe what you're thinking with pursuing the academia. Maybe it can be for Kenzo when he's thinking about pursuing this CFO dream by the time he graduates from college. It could be questions maybe regarding sort of what kind of mistakes to look out for.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny question. How did you come up with this? Because I think it's a very good way to like present it, like rather than following the, for example, the river, like the pathway that's stone, like breaking the, like going through the iceberg. How did you come up with this analogy? Because it's a good analogy. So
yeah, I think that's a very good question. So this one, right?
Yeah.
This one is sort of like a story, actually. A conversation I had with my mom when I was like 13 years old. And I don't remember exactly what she was talking about, but what I do remember is her face when I suddenly told her this analogy that I had on my mind. She was talking about how to change the world. She was working at an international company at the time, helping. I might have been younger. I don't remember, but she was maybe working at an international firm. Yeah, still, maybe at UN or the other one. And she was talking about how to change the world. And I remember saying to her first that, well, if you want to change the world, you want to make sure to approach it in the right way. Because there are two types of, well, first of all, what I told her was, first of all, if you want to change the world, then you have to do something different, right? You cannot change the world by doing what everyone else is doing. That's following everyone's path. And then I told her that there's two types of ways of doing something different. One of them is wrong, one of them is good. The one that's wrong is And I was thinking sort of a river instead of breaking the iceberg. I was thinking of a river, or I mean, this could work as well. So what I told her was some people try to do something different and then try to create an ocean in the middle of the land, in the middle of sort of dirt. No, the problem is that there's no water. How are you going to get water into that new sort of hole that you dig? And then the next thing that I told her was the good way to change the world is by first starting where there is water, and then from there digging a hole towards where you want to go, because that way the water will flow. You're using the resources that are already available, as opposed to just digging a hole in the middle of nowhere and hoping that somehow water will get to that point. That's how I sort of, that's where the analogy, or at least that's the idea where it came from. I don't know why I was thinking of something like that, but I thought it was pretty, I mean, my mom was very shocked. So that was something that was sort of in my head. So I thought I would share it with all of you. With that, let's stop here. So for the other interns, thank you very much for watching this talk. I thought it was I hope it was helpful. And I will see you in the next workshop. Okay. Thank you. I'll stop the recording.